because that's going to mess up. If you're, I mean, even if you have it centered and you're opening up and everything's good, if that starts to wobble. I do have, so you said the wing nuts on there, but you just can't tighten them. Yeah, well, that's John. Have I introduced you guys to John?
I don't know.
Actually, he's a new instructor here. Okay, so basically, right hand's resting here, left hand is laying on top, a slight angle. You know, you kind of push your arm into your body, and I just go straight down. And then I just go across. And you were asking me about the thickness.
Yeah,
so
how
this
do you know
is
how
straight
deep
down,
you
and then I'm kind of going like that. I'm not
Okay.
going any deeper.
You just know from
I still
experience
check.
how far down.
Passing your needle. No, needle.
Oh.
Yeah. So, thanks, Allison. So, you know, you just want to take your needle tool and just hold it, you know, and see how deep the bottom is. So it's just a matter of checking, you know. That's all. And I still will do that sometimes, you know. Now, if I feel like the very center is the deepest and I want to push the clay back in a little bit, you can just take your sponge and just kind of start at the outer edge of your cylinder and push the clay towards that center. So you can even that out. Because if you have a big dip in the very middle, like you're saying, then you can just pull that clay back across. And actually, this process of going from the outer edge to the center and back and forth is really, really helpful to prevent S-cracking or any kind of cracking that might happen. Because you're kind of like lining up the clay platelets by just kind of going back and forth a few times. This is especially true if you're doing like a wide bowl or a plate or something like that. So this is kind of opened up a little bit wider than I would like. So the first thing I'm going to do with this clay is just kind of collar it in a little bit. Just take the clay, just cone it just a little bit so it's not flaring out. Because since we want to throw a straight walled cylinder, you know, I don't want it to flare out in the very beginning. And then, as I was saying the other day too, the first pull, you're really just kind of feeling the thickness of the clay. So it's almost just a way just to get a sense of this. So don't feel like the very first time you pull, you have to just, you know, pull it straight up. Just take your time with it. It's not going to. I mean, you can definitely overwork clay, and you can definitely get it too wet and it turns into a massive wet wall on your reel. But, you know, saying you don't use a lot of water, just enough water to keep it a slight film of water between your hands and the clay. You can really pull up as many times as you want. But having said that, I'm just going to squeeze a little bit of water from my sponge around the wall of the cylinder. Now I'm going to do a pull, just starting at the bottom. And I'm going to come up, and then I'll show you what part of my hands are touching. So you see how it's just real steady and even? I apply less pressure as I get towards the top, and also my outside hand gets more parallel to my inside hand. In the beginning, my outside hand is below, so this is where my inside hand is. You see that bulge? That's where my inside finger is, and you see where the sponge is, it's right below that. So that's as I'm pulling up the bottom, but as I get to the top, they're more parallel to one another. So this is what's touching the clay wall on the inside. My hand is like this. These fingers really stay tight. I was saying the other day, it's kind of like this is a tool. It's kind of shaped like that. I can keep my thumb on the outside when it's not real tall, but as my cylinder gets taller, I just tuck my thumb in. So it's just tucked in like that. So it becomes a tool like this. And I hold the sponge like this. I feel like the sponge gives me more surface contact with the clay wall. If I'm just using my fingers, and some people do, but I just don't feel like I have as much control. So. And you know, to avoid making a bowl, each time you try to make a cylinder, just wet the clay, wet your hands a little bit. Just take your hands and gently collar it in. And when you're collaring the clay in, you don't stay in one spot. You can just move up the walls of the clay like this. Okay, because if you stay in one spot too long with anything you do with clay, it's going to become a weak mold. So, and then always, every time you can, just kind of take a second to clean the lip up. Just holding my hand like this, and then with my sponge or with my finger, just kind of check that lip. Because if the lip really starts to get out of control and too thin or whatever, it's hard to fix that. If you're, you know, if it's really spreading out here and you're having a hard time knowing where to start, you can just take your finger, your thumb, just like this, and just make a little groove there. It gives you a little starting point. So, any questions so far? So once again, just kind of wetting the sponge a little bit, squeezing some water around. I don't want to squeeze so much water that I end up with Lake Murray in the bottom. So you never want standing water. Standing water is never a good thing for anything that you're making. Okay, so once again, just kind of get positioned, and this is where you really just want to kind of feel comfortable. So I'm just tucking my elbow in. My inside hand is like this. These fingers are just at the bottom. I'm going to start right here. I'm going to start my next pool. So I grab some clay. It's really like you're literally grabbing some clay. And then you see that bulge? That's my inside finger. So I'm coming up behind that. And then you see as I get to the top, my fingers, my inside and outside hand become a little more parallel to one another. And I slowly come in, and I'm staying towards the center. I'm not flaring out. And then when I get to the very top lip, I'm just going to gently let go. I don't want to keep coming up over that lip and getting it uneven. And then just taking a second to clean that up a little bit. With each pool, you should have a little more height. You know, you really want to try to have a little more height. And you also notice I'm just staying right over on this side. My hands are not moving around. So those are two things to kind of keep in mind. And then getting up the excess water after a pool, and then just adding a little more. It's just the slightest bit of water, but it just helps to have water. And you really, you know, as you do this, the more you do it, you'll get more of a sense of the thickness of the clay walls and a sense of what that feels like. In the beginning, you're just not sure. But the more you throw, the more you just sense that, the clay between your fingers and how thick or thin that is.
What do you do when they're like kind of like this finger, like holding a ridge and like you can tell that your fingers are uneven when you're pulling or something like that? How can you correct that? That be having that problem, like right? Like I get it smooth and then a little bit of it starts to like ripple it almost.
It starts to ripple?
Like, not like a ripple, but like, yeah, like that. Like that.
Like what?
Like when I'm
Oh, okay, yeah. That's probably the pressure, like you're pushing maybe too much with your outside hand, you're pushing in, and your inside hand's not in the right position for that.
Oh, okay.
And maybe just a little bit too much force. I mean, I think sometimes people when they're first learning to pull the clay wall, they might be applying too much force. You know, it's really a gentle force that you apply. It's not something that really, you know, kind of gouging it in a little bit. So just coloring that somewhat so I can get some more height on this. As you know, the more it kind of flares out, the harder it is to get it straight. And once you get a tall piece, you may just want to go ahead and even wet your arm, because your arm might touch the side and cause it to drag a little bit. So just kind of watch this lace, and maybe this will help you. So as I'm pulling up, you know, you see how I'm just staying right there? I'm not rotating. My fingers are coming up, but they're not changing their position. Does that help?
That's understood.
And then you keep coming up. And now, you know, my hands are more parallel right in here. And that's the other thing you could be doing is kind of twisting it because you're still staying far apart. It's just kind of like gravity. As you come up higher, if your hands are really far apart, it might start to.
Yeah, I guess I love that like that.
You know, this is just a pound and a half of clay, right? Just kidding.
That was a seriously good idea.
Okay, once again, it's flaring out a little bit at the bottom, so I'm going to take a little bit of clay away just using